A new round of COVID propaganda is officially dropped, and what we see is this is going to be a new wave of possible mandates when it comes to masks, vaccines, and also freedom of movement. And if that's the case, then we will be getting lockdowns in December as well as throughout the process of this being introduced in September, according to people like Alex Jones, who has been right about many things and wrong about many things. I don't really know what to take of it. All I know is it's worth paying attention to what people like this say, even if they're entirely wrong. They're saying these things and they should be paid attention to. You can't just ostracize these people and get rid of them and say, well, it's bad information. It can't be talked about. What you do with bad information is you get rid of it by talking about more of this stuff with better information, because the way you beat out the lies is by using the truth and wielding it dutifully. Let's go ahead and jump into this and see what the next wave of COVID propaganda has for us. CNN Health has officially come back with the new quarantine guidelines, the end of quarantine, what people should know about the CDC's new COVID-19 guidelines. I wonder how fast we'll see the sliding scale come if we end up actually getting these lockdowns that get pushed up again through the winter, which, if this is actually the case, what we'll see is that we're getting another wave of COVID hysteria right around another election cycle. Interesting, make of it what you will. So, let's go ahead and get into this. It says, last week, the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention announced key changes to its nationwide COVID-19 guidelines. Among them was the end of required quarantine after someone is exposed to close contact with the coronavirus. The CDC also revised isolation guidance for people infected with COVID-19. So, what they're saying is, no, you no longer have to quarantine. It's no longer mandated that you have to do so. So, that means it was always nonsense. That means it was always ancillary. I don't know what to say about this. This is exactly what it was like with the same thing with the social distancing. It was like, oh, you have to have 6 feet to slow the spread. 6 feet to slow the spread didn't stop the spread of COVID-19. And initially what it was going to be was 10 feet. But 10 feet was too much, and businesses lobbied that was going to be ridiculous, and it was going to have people extended so far out that they would have less people within their businesses. So because of that, they said no. So that means 10 feet was always arbitrary, and it means 6 feet was always arbitrary. It makes you wonder what other restrictions from the government that were pushed for COVID-19 to restructure people's understanding of how they orient themselves in society, how many more of these laws were actually arbitrary. So, with the required quarantine ending, what should people do if they've been exposed? How long should they isolate if they get infected? What's the rationale for making the change, and are there exceptions? Who should take the precaution above and beyond the new recommendations? To guide us through these changes, I spoke with CNN medical analyst Dr. Lena Wen, an emergency physician and a professor of health policy and management at George Washington University Milken Institute School of Public Health. She is also an author of Lifelines, A Doctor's Journey in the Fight for Public Health. There is not a doctor on TV who was more wrong throughout the entire COVID hysteria era than Dr. Leana Wen on CNN. Just go look up Dr. Leana Wen hypocrisy. It will pop up immediately. All of the YouTube videos you could ever want popping up on the fly. This woman had a worse track record than Deborah Birx and Dr. Fauci throughout the COVID hysteria. I don't know how you could be worse than that. The only person I can think of that might have been just as bad is someone like Peter Hotez. Anyways, we get into it. Dr. Leana Wen. It has effectively ended quarantine for most people to exposed to COVID-19. I agree this is a major change in recommendations. The new guidance says that someone exposed to an individual with COVID-19 no longer needs to quarantine at home away from others. They can go to work, attend school, and be in other settings around people as long as they wear a well-fitting, high-quality eye mask, ideally N95 equivalent or more. People should be masking for 10 days following their exposure. I will never wear that piece of cloth bullshit again in my entire life. You will never rigmarole my shit ever again. If you push these totalitarian top-down lockdowns and you try and stuff people in their homes again for COVID, and you try and stop people and you try and shut them in their homes, I'm a very introverted person, and I will become an extrovert solely out of spite. So, here we go. It says, we need more masks. If it's positive, they have a COVID-19, and then they need to go into isolation. If it's negative, they have to continue masking for the 10-day duration. And this whole idea of, oh, well, you're sick, you need to go into isolation. Oh, you mean like it's always been? Like when I was a child and I would get a cold and I wouldn't go to school for 2 days because I didn't want to get anyone else in the school sick? It's almost like we're treating, I don't know, COVID-19 just like we treat the cold and the flu. It's almost like there were people saying that this is exactly what it was going to turn into. And people talking about the fact that we need to save lives and we need to worry about COVID-19 guidelines. If we were really worried about COVID-19 guidelines, what we would do is we would worry about comorbidities. People who are obese, people who are vitamin D deficient. And this is major factors that ended up leading to a lot of deaths during COVID, was the fact that there were people who were obese that were extremely susceptible to COVID-19, and then people who were vitamin D deficient. And we didn't tell people to take vitamin D supplements, and we didn't tell people to go ahead and exercise and lose weight. Instead, we just told people to sit inside, be lethargic, be fat asses, and suffer. And that's exactly what happened, and people died en masse. The restrictions did nothing. They did not save lives. If anything, they made the problem worse. So, what do you need to do? How would you save lives? Well, if anything, what you could do to save lives, to change COVID-19 guidelines, is we could bring back shame. And the first thing we should shame would be the fats. And through the process of bullying the fats, you might be able to save someone from COVID-19, because they won't be obese anymore, and they will be able to make sure that they tap dance their way away from the threat of comorbidities from COVID-19 because of their obesity. And you can say that you bullied that person out of being a fat ass. All right, moving on. So, let's see. What do we have? Updated COVID-19 vaccines are nearly ready as alarm grows over new variants' rapid spread. 3 days ago. We're going to be getting into a clip from Alex Jones here pretty soon, which has been wrong about many things, but has also been right about many things. The Alex Jones is right jar at this point with all of the things that he's talked about. All of the quarters that are stacking up in that thing, it's starting to have pressure cracks at this point. So, new COVID-19 variants' rapid spread. Updated COVID vaccines are expected to become available in the U.S. next month as alarm grows over a new variant dubbed Iris. Healthcare providers are grappling with a rise in hospitalizations stemmed from COVID-19 infections. Iris, or a subvariant of Omicron that originally emerged in late 2021, now accounts for 17% of current COVID cases, according to the CDC. And what happens with these variants? Well, the thing is, as I stated, it will only become less deadly and, what is it? More contagious. Because as it spreads more and more, it will infect more people, and how a virus works is it wants to embed itself within your body and effectively operate without affecting you so it can survive. What COVID-19 is doing is not going to allow the virus to survive, because what it does is it attacks so many different possibilities inside of your body. It's why some people are having issues with their breathing. It's why some people had issues with their heart. It's why COVID-19 actually affects people and does give them myocarditis, which many people are blaming on the vaccine, which is an understandable conversation that people are having, but we don't know what's actually causing this, and we need to be aware. But we also need to be aware of the fact that there was a forced medical injection pushed upon people, and all of a sudden we had this extreme uptick in people having heart issues and having many other issues, as well as people like using the VAERS system and having the vaccine adverse effects skyrocket by roughly 800% at minimum. Take that as you will. Here we see symptoms of the new variant include a runny nose, headache, fatigue, sneezing, and a sore throat. Oh, what's that? It's a cold, basically? That's literally all it is? Moving on. Have no desire. New COVID vaccine and booster shoots for this fall to be available by the end of September. It's almost like it's just the same narrative over and over and over. Go ahead, don't worry, get your booster, end of September. You have to make sure you're prepared for the winter because the flu season's gonna get you. Let's go ahead and jump into Alex Jones. Breaking, Alex Jones once again taps into the fight, saying a TSA whistleblower has told him that TSA employees were instructed on Tuesday that masks are coming back by October for travelers and full COVID restrictions and lockdowns by December due to a new dangerous variant out of Canada. I remember when it was apparently racist and xenophobic when Trump mentioned the fact that COVID-19 itself was the China virus. And they were saying that you can't tie this to a specific people because it's racist. I remember when there was a variant that was coming out of India and people started calling it the India variant and people said that was xenophobic and racist. Why is it that this isn't xenophobic and racist in itself when people are saying, well, there's a new dangerous variant coming out of Canada? It's almost like it's something that's coming out of something so close because it'll be a really good scare factor because the United States will be so close. And maybe this time, in this way, they'll actually be able to propagandize the people again. I can't say that I really see people falling for it. Let's go ahead and get into Alex Jones.
Ladies and gentlemen, I got a call yesterday. An individual was in town, and they wanted to meet with me that I know well. And they are a high-level manager in the TSA. And I went and met with them and had a cup of coffee with them. And they said, you got to warn people. Tuesday, we got called in, the managers, and told that by the middle of September, that the new policy is being written, that this is done. They were told this is happening. This is not hypothetical. you will all have to wear masks again, and so will airport employees.
I will refuse to do it and go out and enjoy life solely out of spite. That is a promise.
Then, by the middle of October, they are going to say that everyone flying has to wear a mask. And in the meetings, people began to ask them, well, I mean, why is this happening? They said, well, because of the new variant in Canada and because of the WHO,
variant?
they may, declare this. But regardless, we've been told this is going to happen.
It's almost like it's effective around an election year to have something that curtails and restructures the value of how
And then,
I don't know, order
they
your
were
election
told,
cycle.
we expect by December a return to the full COVID protocol of 2020-2021.
Never forget the utter insanity that people went through during the COVID crisis. Never forget that people were forced to sit there and look through a window as they looked at their mothers, their fathers, their grandparents, their loved ones dying in a hospital bed, and they couldn't go in because of COVID-19. And as they sat there and they wept and they cried outside that window with their hand pressed against the glass, the nurses danced on TikTok, all upon the graves of the people who died. And they're going to go ahead and try and reenact these lockdowns if that's the case. What will they do? They will only bifurcate the nation even further, destroy the economy even more, make people even more reliant on the government, inflate the currency even harder, destroy the middle class even more, bolster the upper class ever more, pay for the lower class to be funded through the higher taxation of the middle class, and once again, we will see the further destruction of middle America.
And I was given many more details. I wrote down notes on it. Then I left. Called the first federal connection that I was thinking of. Didn't answer. Called the second. Answered. Told them what I've been told. And they said, what day was that? I said, Tuesday. They said, yep, we were told yesterday. Yesterday was Thursday, so it was Wednesday. Expect COVID protocols to begin rolling out middle of September. And I said, what else were you told? Basically that they believe this new variant's super bad and that they're doing the testing and that they should just get ready for a whole new rollout of what happened before. And this was Border Patrol connected people I was talking to, and testing at the border again and the whole shooting match. That's 2 federal agents that told me this yesterday. And then I went and looked at the news, and there they were saying Canada's looking at new restrictions again because of the variant, and so is the EU. And what did the Russians just put out 3 days ago? U.S. is plotting another pandemic. Russian head of the defense ministry warns. Now, new lockdowns will starve the third world. New lockdowns will destroy small businesses. New lockdowns will take the average person that's already $5,000 in the hole and their paycheck is just on time. We'll put them into full bankruptcy. And
if the lockdowns hadn't already done it already, what do you think another round of lockdowns will do? And then after this crisis has subsided and they've further ginned up the propaganda about the climate hysteria, what do you think comes next when the climate lockdowns happen? Because if you think the COVID lockdowns are going to be something, just wait till they find something that they can use as a global crisis that they can say is an existential threat to humanity beyond just this nefarious floating abstraction. Because that's always what it is. It's always a war on some nefarious floating abstraction. The war on terror, the war on COVID, the war on climate change. Always some ethereal ghost that you have to fight. Always for some reason by being taxed ever harder.
the children in the mask and the attempt to push a new shot for the new variant, and we're right back in the same hellhole we were in just a few years ago. And why is it perfect timing? Because you go into the election year, they had the last crisis go over 2.5 years. They'll bare minimum run this through the next election. That's only 14, 15 months out with mail-in ballots again. And we have all the eyewitnesses and testimony that they'd get the mail-in ballots, and in some cases they were 99% for Joe Biden. Who believes that? U.S. Postal Service whistleblowers, USPS, poll watching witnesses. I have it all here. We'll play it next hour. We do not have to sit here and take the same criminal UN, global, WEF, New World Order regimes' second rollout of lockdowns and attempts at forced injections and travel restrictions and being told you're not essential. We don't have to lay down and die.
I'm going to leave it there, and then I'm going to jump into something that Joe Biden said, and I'll cap it off there. But we need to cover something major. There was a large segment of the population that was looked straight in their eyes and told, you're not essential. I don't care how much you make. I don't care how many children you have. You're not essential. Now take this $1,200 and fuck off. And that's exactly what happened. And they left the entire country out to rot, and meanwhile the entire asset holding class only bolstered their wealth. What happens to the middle and lower class? Well, they don't own assets, and when inflation hits, the value of their dollar goes down. But the asset class, they hold on to assets, and since inflation skyrockets, that means the value of their assets skyrocket too, which means they make more money as you yourself are drained ever poorer. And with that, he says, we do not have to submit. And no, we absolutely don't. I will never submit to this totalitarian bullshit ever again. I will never go along with the COVID regime. I'll never listen to the legacy media and what they tell me about what I need to be afraid about, because you cannot trust them. The standard at which you should operate from with these people is that they are lying to you at their face, and they are doing so with glee solely to push a narrative, and then you work your way backwards from there. And in that process, what you'll find is, if you find the truth and that they are being honest, well, you've discovered their honesty, and you will have found a morsel of it throughout an entire mountain of dishonesty. And through that, you'll see that, you know what, it was still worth going through and rigorously understanding the process that I took to actually break this down and realize this was factual information. And then through that process that you've taken, you will be able to understand rigorously that what they give you on a daily basis is a load of bullshit. All right, let's go ahead and jump into this from Joe Biden. So let's go ahead and get into Joe Biden's words on December 16th, 2021. Remarks by President Biden after meeting with members of the COVID-19 response team. Yeah, let's get into it. I remember seeing this drop within 10 minutes of it actually releasing, and I knew exactly what this was. This is nothing more than mob tactics, because government is nothing more than a corporation in the limit, and when you realize that they're nothing more than a mob at the full extent of what a mob can be when it controls territory and power, and you realize that they use, gang tactics to go ahead and extort you from your currency using a racketeering scheme, which would be taxation. And if you don't pay your taxes, you're at the threat of a gun. And if you don't go ahead and say yes to the fact that you are at the threat of a gun, well, they'll throw you in a cell and treat you like an animal because you refuse to go ahead and pay through the extortion racket. Let's get into Joe Biden. Folks, I'm not going to take questions today because I have a direct message to the American people, and tomorrow the team is going to be on television and talking in more detail about what I'm going to be speaking about today. But I want to send a direct message to the American people. Due to the steps we've taken, Omicron has not yet spread as fast as it otherwise would have done and is happening in Europe, but here it is now, and it's spreading, and it's going to increase. And as we know, and as I've stated, Omicron was always going to spread everywhere. There was no stopping it because it had less lethality and it was more contagious. And due to the fact that it was more contagious, it was always going to be spread amongst a wide array of people. For the unvaccinated, we're looking at a severe winter of illness and death. If you're unvaccinated, for themselves, their families, and their hospitals, they'll soon be overwhelmed. And we know that this was absolute crock of shit and it never happened. But that's good news. If you're vaccinated and you had your booster shot, you're protected from severe illness and death. Period. Number 2, booster shots work. 3, boosters are free, safe, and convenient. Yeah, listen, the shots are so effective that, listen, I know you got your first shot, and we tested the vaccines on the fact of the initial variant, but the second variant, like Delta, had already come out. So when we used the shots, they technically weren't effective because we knew we were going to be vaccinating during a pandemic. And when you vaccinate during a pandemic, what you do is you make people variant factories. So there were just widespread variants being produced in mass, which was infecting so many people, which made COVID-19 spread, which made it more unstoppable. And any epidemiologist worth their salt or any virologist worth their salt will tell you that what you don't want to do is vaccinate during a pandemic. Simply put. So, like he said, number 2, booster shots work. 3, boosters are free, safe, and convenient. And they're so good that they had to make sure that you had to get 2. The first shot was so good that on the punch card that they gave you when you had your vaccine card, they made sure that there were 2 slots. And once you got your second vaccine, oh, well, don't you worry, you're fine, you're fully protected. Now go ahead and get this booster. And don't you worry, that booster was so effective to stop COVID that there's a second booster for you. And don't you worry, that second booster is in fact so effective that we've made a yearly COVID shot. Don't you worry, your yearly COVID shot is in fact so effective that you will be getting a COVID shot every 6 months. In fact, why not get one every single time you get a flu shot? Oh, it looks like the sliding scale has shifted and the narrative has changed. COVID is now a yearly threat that we must face. It's this innocuous floating abstraction. We have to be in fear of it. Make sure you get your yearly COVID shot. Scratch that. Make sure you get your shot every single season. Because we need to make sure that you're safe and you're protected from this deadly, deadly virus. It's not like shutting down the country, destroying the economy, telling people they were not essential, and completely scuttling what everyone could do to operate within the economic system that we have structured. And what you did was, in the process of doing so, you gave them $1,200. Destroyed their currency, completely blew out the value of people's cultural understanding of what work means to the contextual depth of the American soul. And in the process, you robbed a large portion of people of their understanding of how to achieve purpose because they now have no process of orienting themselves in the world because they've conditioned themselves due to the apparatus that was established by COVID. That's all I've got for this. I'm going to go ahead and leave it here on Joe Biden's poisonous words saying that if you were going to head and not be vaccinated, you had a winter of severe illness and death ahead of you. I hope you're all safe. I hope you all stay safe. Don't fall for the propaganda and the narratives. It's all nonsense, as we all know. Stay lovely, stay great. Give this a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, a thumbs down if you didn't. Tell me where I'm wrong in the comment section below. Peace out.